Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to House District 70. Let me get it right. Texas House District 70 Republican runoff candidate conversation. Looking forward to a great conversation. By the way, both candidates were invited. However, we were blessed with one. And we'll tell you more about how we're going to proceed and who that candidate is. So stay tuned. This presentation will be on Facebook Live and will also be recorded. Um, Once again, welcome on behalf of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Delta Alpha Alpha Zeta Chapter. Let me tell you a little bit about Zeta Phi Beta Sorority. We were founded in January 16th, 1920 at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And our five founders focus on our principles that involved scholarship, service, sisterhood, and final womanhood. And they were dedicated to addressing the issues of prejudice and poverty when you think about the world in 1920. Through our work with Zetas helping other people excel, we're so excited to talk about getting engaged. We are a community conscious, action oriented organization, and we take our commitment to serving the community very serious. And we're also very dedicated to make sure that we, as sorority, and that the community is educated about what's going on here in our Cullen County area. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about our moderator, Pamela Hart. Pamela is a former newspaper journalist. She was the first African American to produce and anchor a regularly featured news show in Northeast Louisiana. She has interviewed scores of notables, including Stokely Carmichael, Jim Varney, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and the late former First Lady Barbara Bush. Her writing pursuits with the National Association of Blacks in Criminal Justice earned her an opportunity to travel with the U.S. delegation to exchange criminal justice information with the island government of Trinidad and Tobago. Pamela is a retired IT manager of a Fortune 50 insurance company, where she's also led teams to establish award-winning first-line leadership training that included workshops taken by higher level leaders as well. She migrated portions of the company's core business to the Canadian insurance company, and she infused diversity learnings to impact business imperatives. In addition, Pamela achieved an award merit from the Public Relations Society of Central Illinois for producing a groundbreaking informational video for her company's agency convention. And for nearly 2 decades, she was instrumental in successfully grooming the next generation of individuals vying for technology management positions as she mentored employees through the organization. Pamela is the founder and president of Vision Forum, a communications and consulting entity designed to create the formula of success leading to phenomenal realities for clients. A journalism psychology graduate of the University of Louisiana, Pamela is a 2008 fellow of the former board member of the National African American Women's Leadership Institute, NALI, which makes her my NALI sister as well. She serves her community through volunteerism and served several entities through the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church of Plano, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated of Frisco, and the Plano Child Care Learning Academies Board. Pamela is the mother of 3 talented children: Warren Christopher, who's a computer professional, songwriter, and rapper, known professionally as Handles McGee. She has Braxton Ricard, who's an actor, and Tia Michelle, who is a producer, writer, composer, and singer. And as I mentioned before, she's also my sister in Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. So, Pamela, I'm going to turn it over to you for you to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you so much, Greta. It's wonderful to see everyone here today. Welcome to today's Candidate Forum. We're going to have a great conversation, learn a lot about the candidate today, and you'll want to stay tuned until the end of this forum because we've got some very important information to share with you about next Thursday. So stay tuned. But without further ado, we'd like to welcome our special guest today, candidate for House District 70 in the Republican runoff, Jamee Jolly. Welcome, Jamee. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Now, we realize this time is going to fly and we want people to hear what you have to say today. Let's kick it off with an elevator speech, let's say, maybe about a minute or so, about your platform, what's near and dear to your heart.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And will start by saying I'm a 20+ year resident in Collin County. I'm actually a native Texan, born in Dallas, and have called Texas home my entire life. I did escape for a little bit off to Florida State for my master's degree, but came back as quickly as possible. What I'm really working towards as a candidate and hopefully as an elected representative is I want Texas to remain the amazing state that we have really all grown to love. And we've gone through a lot of changes, a lot of growth as a state. And I think it's very important that as we look forward, that we plan and that we are effective in our leadership when it comes to important issues. For instance, I think one of the most important issues that's probably top of mind is property tax reform, school finance. Everybody got their assessments. And so that's made everybody kind of wake up to, uh-oh, what's going on there? Also, we have to figure out a way to harden our grid, our electric grid. We need to make sure that the next Uri or winter storm that we have does not take down our grid, but also we have amazing growth and we're adding new homes and new demands on the system. So that is a key important issue that we'll need to address in this next session. And I'm really running to serve this community. I've been a CEO of the Chamber of Commerce here in Plano for 10 years. I worked for the Plano Independent School District's Education Foundation, which is the nonprofit arm. And I've also worked in associations in the greater Dallas area through the Restaurant Association and Clyde Warren Park and other nonprofits. And so I'm just glad to be here today and can't wait to talk to you about some of the issues that we're going to dig into.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jamie. Well, one of those issues you just mentioned, great segue, property taxes. They're soaring right now. It's a very hot topic. And so I know that you're advocating for lower property taxes. What's your plan? And how will you work with other lawmakers? Let's say you are elected. How will you work with other folks to ensure that citizens get relief?
So yes, property taxes are definitely in need of reform. And I'll start by saying 20 some odd years ago, when I bought my first house as a young professional and a single woman, that's such a big investment. And for most of us, it's our largest investment, right? We're all wanting to acquire that American dream of buying a home. And that's become more and more difficult because of the growing taxes that we're seeing. And I want to be careful though, because we all want our assessments to grow. So we want to know that our investment, our homes are gaining value. That would be a good thing. But what we've done in Texas is we've built school finance on the backs of homeowners. And so as our values go up and we continue to pay more taxes into school finance, the state of Texas has lowered their contribution to education. And so what you're seeing is the state used to probably give us 60% of our funding for education. It's well below 50% now. And so what you're seeing is that we need to be able to really work towards leveling that back up. So the state needs to contribute more funding. And at the same time, what we can do is give meaningful and sustainable property tax relief to homeowners. So I don't want to cut funding for education. If you go back to 30 some odd years ago when we created the Robin Hood, the recapture system, it was to provide equity in education. I want to know that if you're a student in Plano ISD, Prosper ISD, or out in East Texas in a small town, that you are having the same experience as a student and that you have access to the same resources. I think we can do that by increasing what our state is putting in funding, while we're also giving some property tax relief. Each year, our comptroller comes out and he says, we have a surplus in funding from taxes. If we were properly funding education, we wouldn't end up with this surplus. We would actually be able to end up with some tax relief. And so that's kind of where I want to focus my efforts. There's also some little areas that you can, there's some quick fixes. For instance, if you're a district, a small district, let's say out in East Texas, where you get money from Robin Hood, so you're getting state funding into your school district, there is nothing that requires you to actually raise your local taxes to show that you're committed to education. So what we're seeing is some of these districts haven't raised their own tax rates in years, but yet they're going to the state coffers and they're taking tax dollars from those districts that pay into Robin Hood. And so while it was created, I think for a very good reason, I think that now that we have property values the way that they are in Texas, this is a great time to reassess how we pay for school finance, but also what kind of tax relief we can give our Texas homeowners, which also applies to any renters, because again, if property values go up, it trickles down. It definitely gets into the rent. We've seen rents going up as well.
Oh yeah, that's been a big conversation as well. Thanks for explaining that. I really appreciate your perspective. Tax relief versus surplus, or, it'll be important to take a look at that and ensure that we not have as much of a surplus, but some tax relief. It really, really is growing taxes for folks.
And Pamela, I'll be honest, in the past, this has been a urban versus rural issue, because what we're seeing is that rural districts were typically the ones paying in, and then urban districts were paying in and rural were benefiting. Even in rural counties, they are not getting their fair share of Robin Hood dollars because of a new allocation formula that was part of HB 3 a couple of sessions ago. And so now we're starting to get the attention of some of our legislators that are in more rural areas that are willing to have those conversations. So I do look forward to being able to hopefully move this issue forward. Whereas in the past, we've kind of had to stall out because, let's be honest, there's more rural state reps than there are urban. And but once they start to feel the pinch like we have, then we are all kind of in the same boat together. So that'll make it an easier issue, hopefully, to take on this next session.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that. Speaking of our communities, let's jump to another question and chat a little bit about law enforcement. So what are your thoughts on training the police to better recognize mental health and the implementation of a de-escalation program that aligns with mental health priorities, so that we can better serve our communities and people who are going through these challenges?
Sure, great question. And as we all know, during this pandemic, I think mental health has become so much more of a focus. I am sorry, see that dog, I knew that was going to happen. But it's become more of a focus for all families, I think, for children, but also adults. I think people were isolated, and we've seen more cases of mental health just challenges. But I will say that I had the chance to meet with our police chief, Ed Drain, and Ed is the first African-American police chief in Plano. He was appointed, gosh, it's probably been 2 years now. It was in the middle of the pandemic, and we were very fortunate to have Ed come back and join the team. Molly, sorry, let me get her a toy while she's not playing with my foot here. But Ed came back and joined the team, and he came in as our chief, and he has done a great job of just helping make sure we understand what's happening at the state level, because every time the state legislature changes policing, it really impacts everything from training to hiring to how they manage the department. And so I really wanted to have a better understanding of what can we do at the state level that will truly positively impact policing in our community. And so there's some great ideas that he has. And I think that one of the main things that I want to see is just making sure that we do have officers that are trained to deal with the mental health challenges. When you pull over an individual that's having a mental health crisis, that definitely needs to be handled in a different, more sensitive way. And there's proven proven techniques out there. And we're seeing those being employed in different communities, and they're working. And so I do think that working with our local police chief and understanding some of our challenges, but also some of the opportunities we have, is going to be a priority for me. I have a brother-in-law who is a police officer. I have a sister that is a wife of a police officer. And to be very honest, it's a very stressful time to be a police officer. And I think we need to continue to encourage police officers at the same time that we need to make sure that they're held to certain standards. And, in places like Plano, Texas, we feel like we're insulated and that things don't happen, but we've seen things happen where in the community, people are questioning our policing. And so we have to keep that dialogue open. You mentioned, Pamela, I think you attend Shiloh, and I know that we have a coalition in our city of our pastors that get together and talk. And that's something that if I'm elected, I would love to be able to sit in with those pastors and understand some of these concerns within different elements of our community, because they truly have a good pulse on what's happening and where people are struggling and where there's challenges. And so I would say funding for mental health has not been the priority that I would like to have seen it be in the past. However, it's becoming more and more important as we have continued to see mental health challenges grow in our community. If you look at the number of beds in our hospital system in Collin County for mental health, it's disturbing. If your child has a nervous breakdown or tries to commit suicide or has some type of mental health emergency, you will go sit in the waiting room at Children's in Plano, and you could be there for 24 to 48 hours. No problem. Like that's on a good night. There are no empty beds for mental health in our community. And as we continue to grow, we have to demand that there's funding for those in our hospitals across the district, whether it be in Plano or up north in Frisco or Prosper, Salina. Those demands are not going away. We're going to continue to see that within our students, and we need to be prepared for that. And we need to fund it. We need to adequately find the funding to support those efforts to help when it comes to our children, but just also, like you were mentioning, in the mental health when it comes to policing.
Thank you for that, Jamie. Sounds like you're certainly aware of those sensitivities in the various communities and that you touched upon. And you also talked about creating coalitions, and you've worked and spoken with Chief Drain and looking at partnering with pastors.
Yes, I think that's, I think about the faith-based community and during the pandemic, the role that many of them played in our community, just helping people find services to stay connected. I've been blessed to work with Richie Butler. If you know Richie, he's a pastor out of Dallas, lives in Plano, and he really talks about how to best serve your communities through those faith-based coalitions. And so I want to make sure that that's something that as a state rep, I'm focused on and that I implement in my outreach that I'm doing into our different communities.
Thanks for that. And funding is usually a challenge when people talk about that. So we look forward to hearing more. Mm-hmm. Education, the topic of education and funding. So in your priorities, you propose more state funds for public education. So how will your plans ensure that we are providing the best possible education for children throughout all of our communities?
Great question. So I'm a product of public education. I was employed, like I mentioned, for the last 2 years. I did take a leave of absence to campaign, but I was employed by Plano ISD Independent School District with our education foundation. And I know that education is the equalizer. If everyone has equal access to quality education, they can have opportunities in today's world. And so, there's a lot of conversation right now about vouchers and charter schools and other types of education. And I think every parent should be able to assess what's a best fit for their child. However, public education, what sets us apart, public schools, is we're not allowed to deny any student. We do not care if you have special needs. We don't care if you have physical disabilities that create challenges in the classroom. We don't care if you came here as a refugee 3 weeks ago and can't speak our language. Our job as public educators is to educate you, to provide you a quality education. And so that's where I probably differ the most from my opponent is the voucher system. I've not seen in other states where it's been implemented. I've not seen that this is kind of a double negative, where it has not had a negative effect on schools, public schools. So I want to do more homework. I'll be honest. That's a thing that I don't know a lot about on the vouchers, but I've started looking at, I believe it's Wisconsin, Florida just implemented some vouchers. I want to see how that works and how it impacts access for every student at every level. Because what I understand is if you do a voucher, so let's say you get the allotment for $6,000 for your child, you can choose to send them to a private school. That private school might cost $12,000. So you as a parent still have to make up the difference in tuition in order for your child to go to private school. Well, what that's going to create is still a system of have and have not. Sorry, that's my golden doodle. Have and have not. So how do we make sure that even with the voucher system, there is a way that every student has access? And I'm just not convinced that's right for what Texas is doing and the population that we're trying to serve in our public schools. Plano ISD serves roughly 50,000 students. 37% of those students are on free and reduced lunch. A lot of people would find that shocking. They think of Plano as a very affluent community, but we have definite needs in our community, and those students need additional resources and need additional funding and help in the classroom and outside the classroom. And so that's where I think we've really got to make sure public education is continually supported at the state level through different programs, funding, and also through our State Board of Education.
Thanks for that. There was, and not to put you on the spot because you might not know a lot about something that came out today. There was a public education funding issue that Governor Abbott made a statement on, and some folks thought it was pretty controversial. I didn't know whether you went into that at all.
I'm one of those people that would agree with you, Pamela. From my understanding, and again, I saw this on my phone as I'm knocking doors, but what I understand is that Greg Abbott said we can revisit the Supreme Court case in Texas that says we are required to educate each and every child. And here's my problem with that. And I don't know what his intentions are. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but here's my problem. Even if you go back into Texas history and you look at the Battle of the Alamo, the number 2 reason we fought for independence was so that we had a public education system so that we could have an educated society. That is something that we have had in our core as a state, and we should. That is only going to help our state continue to thrive and serve the families that call Texas home. And I don't know what his intentions were on that. And again, I read it in a very quick passing, but I'm very curious as to what his thoughts are on that, because I do not think that would be an option that we would even want to entertain in the state of Texas.
Of course, I'm sure we'll be hearing more on that issue. Thank you, Jamie. Now, business. Let's touch upon the business community. I know you're a leader in the chamber, and you've demonstrated the importance of supporting local businesses. Now, let's focus a little bit about a little bit on minority business owners. Any plans to assist such owners in your district?
Yes, so I was very fortunate to lead a great chamber of commerce, Plano Chamber, and we were actually ranked the #1 chamber in the nation under my leadership. And I actually owned a business with my sister. My dad had an air conditioning business that she and I ran after he passed away. And so I understand the challenges that face our businesses, especially those smaller businesses that are trying to compete and offer competitive salaries and benefits and other things like that. As far as what we can do to support our minority businesses, I think continually reevaluating some of the certifications that we offer and some of the opportunities that are created through the state, but also making sure that any programs we have factor into consideration the thought that we do have a lot of minority-owned businesses in Collin County. In fact, there's a Chamber of Commerce, and when I was Chamber CEO, I remember meeting with our Collin County Black Chamber and really talking about how can we do a better job of connecting our minority-owned businesses with our large corporations. Plano is fortunate, and North Texas is fortunate to call many great, huge companies our headquarters and their home. But how do we make sure that if you're operating a business, a small business especially, how do you get in front of those audiences? And so we had done some different forums and some different matchmaking, if you will, between companies and our small businesses. And I just think we have to continually look for opportunities, look for ways that we can continue to support those small businesses in our community. And I think, like companies like Toyota, if you look at their initiatives and how they have been able to really partner in meaningful ways with minority-owned businesses, I think they could be an example that maybe we encourage in other places and with other companies throughout our state.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jamie. So it looks like we have about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to go to chat to see whether we have any questions. Pressing questions anyone would like to ask. Let's see here.
Would you like for me to read them for you, Pam? We do have questions.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
One question, and I think you kind of answered this a little bit, but was around the property taxes. How would you fund education if not through property taxes?
Yeah, and I did mention, keep in mind, every year we brag about a surplus in the state, and typically that surplus is going to do other things. Right now it's being diverted to protect the border. If we were properly funding education through the state budget like we've done in the past 20 years ago, then we would have less demand on property taxes. And so we would actually be able to refund or hopefully just lower property taxes to be able to balance that. So I do think it comes from having the surplus. It's also, we're going to have to tighten our budgets. I think all of us are doing that, right? I mean, we all are in the middle of inflation, and we're all kind of having to look at where we're spending our dollars. And so if education is truly a priority for the state, and it's something that I think should be one of our top priorities, then we have to properly find the funding, make it sustainable over time so that we're not going back and revisiting this every single legislative cycle.
Okay. The next question is, what are the plans for multicultural awareness within the police department? Many times behaviors are misunderstood. By bringing awareness to multicultural norms, this can bring about change and wake us up to unconscious bias.
So I think that's a great question. And I think keep in mind, my perspective is Plano, Texas. And I do think that we have done a lot of work in this area. So the city has the Multicultural Roundtable. We have different, in fact, this Saturday, we have our Asia Fest, where we are trying to keep that front of mind that we have a melting pot of diversity here in our community. And I think a lot of that's in Texas in general, but definitely in Plano and North Texas because of the companies that have come here from all over the world. And so simple things of just, like you said, understanding the norms and doing training on those norms. Also, making sure we're introducing our police officers to the different sectors in our community. And so I know that we have I believe his title is like an outreach officer, where he'll go out and meet with faith-based groups. He'll meet with private schools or individual neighborhoods and talk about policing, but he's also there to learn about their culture and their communities. And so I think we have to continue that. It has to be a priority. Unfortunately, it's 2022 and we're still in a condition that some people don't quite understand that we are in a diverse world and that we can all live here and be friends and be neighbors and work together towards the betterment of our community. So I would hope that that we could continue to train, especially in policing, train those folks and make sure that they're aware. I also think it also goes back to hiring practices. This is something I talked to Chief Drain about. We need to make sure that hiring practices includes some understanding and questions related to a person's beliefs, because those are not unconscious biases all the time. Those may be beliefs they bring with them. So we need to make sure that we're going into this with a very open, transparent process when we hire officers to protect our very diverse communities.
Okay, next question. If not the voucher system, what is your solution to ensure students who have parents earning near the third or fourth quartile are getting resources and quality education?
Yeah, so if you, in the whole property tax reform, if you properly fund education the way it should be funded. So right now, the problem we're really having is we don't have a cost per student that is indexed according to inflation or anything in that nature. And so there are some districts that are able to pay their employees more. There's other districts that can't. So you're seeing some of the teachers that maybe stronger teachers go to other districts, and that creates some inequities in the classroom. We want good teachers across the state in all of our classrooms, and we want to make sure that each district has the ability to compete. And so I think a lot of the reforms that we can do as relates to school finance will help in some of that, making sure that every student has resources and a quality education. As far as vouchers, I mean, I do think, keep in mind, there are currently public schools that are charter schools. So that is a choice for parents. Those are funded through a state allotment to those schools versus property taxes. Problem with those are they don't have an elected body and that governs them like a school board. So a lot of parents feel like there's not a way to weigh in on those, on what they're teaching and things like that. So they have some problems that we're trying to work through and understand. But I think all of us as community members, and I know many of you are probably parents and some of you are mothers, and happy Mother's Day this weekend. But I think it's our duty to continually challenge and ask, what are our kids learning in the classroom? How are they performing? What is the most important thing that they need to be walking out of that classroom with in order to be good citizens in our community? And I think with all the things that have been going on lately, I think more people are aware and more parents are getting involved. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing.
Hey, Jamie and Pamela, we have so many great questions.
Yes.
What are you okay with going with a couple more questions and going just a little bit longer?
How's everybody doing? Because we are at the time. We're actually a little over the time. So maybe a couple more questions and then we will end the.
Okay. Yeah, and Greta, maybe I can make it a little faster. I'll just read I'm looking over there. So border security question real quick. It's a look, it's not just about building a physical barrier. Physical barrier is part of it, but you ask anybody in the military, if you build a wall and you don't protect it with guards and you don't staff it, but you also don't have the technology for surveillance, it does no good. So I think it's got to be a very varied approach when it comes to protecting our border. We're seeing increased crime and drugs come across our border. On the other hand, a lot of people want to put immigration with border security. To me, those are two issues. We as Texans, unfortunately, the federal government's not going to help us. We have to protect our borders. We can't afford to have this influx of crime and drugs. Now, on the flip side, the immigration issue, we're not able to build a wall all the way around Texas. That would take us like 100 years. So we don't want to do that. We need to work with our federal government to put together a reasonable immigration plan. There are people that are wanting to come to this country for the right reasons and for good reasons. They want the opportunities that you and I have had. And I think we need to find ways to make that more accessible to individuals. And through technology, we have some great companies in Texas that do amazing things. Why can't we employ some private sector partnerships to figure out the immigration issue? To ask someone to wait 7 years to go through the process of applying for immigration, it's not reasonable. And that's where we continue to have the challenges that will lead to the crime that we're seeing at the border. So to me, those are two issues that we have to work carefully with and make sure that we treat those very differently. Do you feel that in the state of Texas, our Second Amendment is threatened? If so, how do you plan to defend our rights? So I feel like Texas has been in the front of gun rights. I will be honest, I had major concerns about open carry. When I wasn't a candidate at that point when we passed open carry in the state of Texas. My concern is I called my police chief at the time and I said, how does open carry impact your ability to protect citizens in Plano? And come to find out, none of our state reps had bothered to call him at that time and ask that simple question. And that's where I feel like I'm a great candidate because I have connections and I don't know everything. I trust me, I don't know everything at all. So I want to have those resources in our community, those deep roots, to pick up the phone and call our police chief or our city manager or our constable and say, how do these things impact your ability to do your job? And so open carry is not my favorite thing. I don't think there's any movement towards fighting that. But I think as a state, we've done enough to allow for people to protect their homes and protect their property through the Second Amendment. So just to answer that question. And yes, Mary Moses. Hi, is that Fred on there? Am I seeing Fred? Yeah, I see it says when you were president of the chamber, there was an award for Fred Moses. Why was the award discontinued? You know, I'm not sure because I think that happened after I left. Maybe the year after I left, it was discontinued. I think what some organizations want to do, and I've heard this from other chambers across the nation as I was working in different areas, is that we were integrating our minority-owned businesses into all the awards of the chamber. And so we wanted to make sure that, and this happened a lot in some of the more urban chambers, but we want to honor all minority-owned businesses, whether you're business of the year or business person of the year. We wanted to make sure that as a chamber community, I think that was the goal in doing that. But I'm not sure, I can't speak to the Plano Chamber's reasoning in doing that. I'm not sure.
Jamie, thank you so much. Let's let that be the last question.
Sorry.
Fantastic conversation. We feel like we really got an opportunity to know your platform, what you're standing for, a little bit about your personality and your doggy, your baby there. Fantastic. Yes. Just to let folks know, next Thursday, same place, same time, we will feature the Democratic candidates for House District 70. So we hope you'll join us. Become more informed so that we can exercise that important right to vote. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.